All right, what's going on, my friends? Rip City Drive with Dwight and Chad, and we got a big show lined up for you today. We are efforting Danny Ainge right now, who won 2 championships as a member of the Celtics, and of course was on that terrific '86 Celtics team with Bill Walton. David Lucas, the son of Maurice Lucas, who was very close with Bill, considered him a father figure. He's going to join us in studio coming up in 20 minutes. The Dean of Portland Sports, Kerry Agers, will join us in studio at 4:20. And then at 5:20, one of his former teammates, Dave Twardzik, part of the '77 championship team, will also join the show. Of course, we got the news yesterday that Bill Walton had passed away at the age of 71. And Dwight, what was your reaction when you first heard the news?
I was surprised, Chad, because I had no idea he was dealing with cancer at all. I had heard nothing about that. And as we'll find out later, I think some of his former teammates had no idea. It was a surprise. And then I was sad.
Yeah, Bill Walton, I've thought about this a lot since yesterday when I got the news. He would not want you, me, or anybody else in Rip City to be sad or shed tears today because that's not how he operated, right? He was a happy guy who lived life to the fullest. And so I think today is kind of a celebration of Bill Walton for everything that he meant to his friends, his family, to the game of basketball, but most importantly, here in Rip City, Godfather. And you know it as well as anyone that the connection between the community and the team in Portland is special because of what happened in '77. And Bill Walton was the center of that. And the best way I can put it is we can debate who the greatest trailblazer of all time is. But the one thing that cannot be debated during that period of time, that short window where he won the championship and they started the next year at 50-10, where he was finals MVP and league MVP, no one has played better basketball in the Trailblazer uniform than Bill Walton.
No question about it. No question. One of the best centers of all time. When healthy, I think it's hard to find a center any better than him. I mean, he's really, he was so special.
He was awesome, and you always talk about the way he played the game. He was a selfless player who just cared about winning, but you loved watching him play because he approached the game a lot like we see from Jokic with Denver now, where he's playing chess and the rest of the guys out there are playing checkers. It's the anticipation and understanding of where guys are going, where they should be, and how you need to play the game to win. And that's by sharing the ball, moving bodies, and being willing to do whatever it takes to help your team out. And that could look differently night in and night out, and that's what Bill was able to do. He didn't care whether it was the Trailblazers or his work with the Celtics, obviously what he did in college basketball. He was the consummate team player, even though he was the best player.
Yeah, and he took great delight when his teammates did score, and he loved to credit them in post-game interviews. He wasn't one of those me guys. He really wasn't. All the way through, anytime I've ever spoken with him, it was always about other people.
All right, very happy to go to the phones right now and welcome in a gentleman who won 2 championships with the Boston Celtics and one of those on that great '86 team with Bill Walton, now an executive with the Utah Jazz. It's Danny Ainge, who is on the Rip City Drive. Danny, good afternoon. Thanks for your time.
How you doing, guys?
Oh, it's great to talk.
Doing well.
Oh, no, it's great to have you on, and, of course, it's great to get your perspective. But you once said that, when Bill came to Boston that, you idolized him. You were a big fan. All of you guys were big fans of Bill. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I mean, we grew up watching Bill. All of us knew, remembered his college career very well. We all looked up to him, and everybody remembered his 1977 run with the Blazers and how spectacular that was. And, we all idolized him. Matter of fact, there was, I think, when Kevin McHale met Bill, when Kevin McHale's wife met Bill for the first time, she told Bill that Kevin had a poster of him up on his dorm room in college. And, Bill never let Kevin live that down.
Bill was that kind of guy, too. He gave a little bit of needling. At least he used to needle me. I bet he needled you, too. But he also he had that ability to take the same needling back, right?
Oh, absolutely. No, he was so fun, and he was a great guy. And, Bill took plenty of needling from Kevin. Let's make that clear. But Bill did give Kevin back, and that was one thing that bothered Kevin, was that Bill knew that he had a poster of him in his room.
Hey, Danny, one story that's out there was, when Bill went to Boston and was going to join the Celtics, before he met with the rest of the team, he went to Robert Parrish and he met with Chief to assure him that he wasn't there to take his job, but wanted to make him a better player and be the best teammate he could. What did that mean to Chief and to the rest of you guys when Bill came to Boston?
Well, I mean, it's just a really smart, savvy move by Bill. Like he's not trying to come in there and do anything. He's trying to just be part of what we already have. And I mean, he did that with a lot of us. But the most important person he did that with was with Robert, since they played the same position. And Robert welcomed him with open arms and was glad that we were able to acquire him. And it was smooth sailing. But everybody liked Bill, and Bill was very smart in his approach to coming into our team.
Danny, watching him from afar, from here in Portland, during that time with Boston, it looked like a combination of joy and relief to finally be with a team again that was great. You guys were a great team. He knew he had great teammates. He knew he had a chance to win a championship. And it just seemed like he was just so happy to be a part of a team again, unlike maybe other places he'd been. But what was it like to be his teammate?
It was great because you could feel that gratitude he had. Here's a guy that had so many injuries. Dwight, I think that I remembered him when he came to the team, and we looked it up, and I said, wow, I played more games than you in 5 years in the NBA than you've had 13.
Wow.
And, just giving him, needling him a little bit, but he was so grateful to be there. And with all that he had been through from a health standpoint, and I think his health was not great even when he showed up. I remember hearing a story of Red kind of closing his eyes to some of the things on the physical just because Bill wanted to play so bad. And I think that his desire and his gratitude that he had rubbed off on all of us. This is a pretty special place to be at this moment in time, and it was great for everybody when he arrived.
Danny, could you see pain in him during that time? Was it obvious he was hurting? And if so, where? I mean, he had so many things. His feet while he was here were terrible, but then he started having back problems later on, and what did you see while he was in Boston with you guys?
Yeah, I mean, he wasn't super mobile by any stretch, and maybe you guys heard the story of Jerry Seasting's in his way as he's running back on defense, and he makes the comment to Jerry, the only thing I hate worse than guards is blankety blank backup guards. And he did not like to move laterally to get out of the way of somebody in his path as he ran back in transition. But yeah, his feet weren't good, but he just endured it, and he gave us 18 minutes a night and 22 minutes in some of the biggest games of the season, and he had such a special mind and vision and understanding of the game overall, that it was an understanding of everybody else's strengths and weaknesses of that team. It was just having another great point guard or another Larry Bird that wasn't a shooter on the court.
Bonus points, by the way, for mentioning Jerry Seasting. I just have to throw that in because I always liked Jerry. Good guy. I wanted to ask you, too, you have a favorite Bill Walton story that we haven't asked you for yet? Is there something that you'll always remember about him?
Oh, I remember. Well, the story, he tells a story about, my wife wouldn't let me go to the Grateful Dead concert. And I get a chuckle out of that. But basically what happened was he was in taking the team to the Grateful Dead, and I was not a Grateful Dead fan, but I hadn't spent much time listening to him. So I asked him after practice one day, I said, hey, Bill, do you have a tape I can, borrow just to go listen to Grateful Dead, see if I like them. So he gives me a tape, and I listen to it on my way home, and I listen to it on my way to practice the next day, and I bring the tape in from my car to give back to him. But I said, Bill, like, what is your favorite song? Like, I need to know what it is you love about the Grateful Dead. And he just rips the tape right out of my hand and says, when you're a Dead fan, it's all one song.
Of course.
Hey,
And I mean, that was just classic Bill.
Yeah.
Hey, Danny, do you remember when you were younger, did you have a chance to get tickets to see him play with UCLA at McCourt?
Oh, yeah, like that was the biggest ticket in town. Are you kidding? We've looked forward to that game all year. As soon as basketball season started, it was like, when does UCLA come to town? And I remember one year my parents, like, bribed me with, if I get a 4.0 in the first semester, like, I can go to the UCLA game. So, yeah, it was a big deal back then.
I was betting that you snuck in. That was that's what I was betting on, because I know as a student down there, as a freshman, we used to figure out ways to sneak into that building, but that's just me.
Yeah.
The question, Danny, now you're working with the Utah Jazz now, and obvious still great connections with Boston, I'm sure. Can you allow yourself to root for them this season in the playoffs? You're not there. They're not playing you or anything like that. What's your stance on things like that now that you're with another club?
Yeah, I mean, I'm rooting for Boston. I have a great relationship and a great friend in Brad Stevens, and my son works with Brad and has now for the last 10 years with Boston. A lot of the people that are there are my dear friends that I worked with for over 18 years. So, yeah, I do allow myself at this time, especially when our team isn't playing. We're getting ready for the off season, and I am rooting for the Boston Celtics. At the same time, I have a great relationship with Jason Kidd. I coached for 3 years in Phoenix. I've stayed very close with him over the years, and I root for Jason also to do well. But I think that my son wins out on this one.
Yeah, that's the way it's supposed to be. Do you think they're going to go all the way, Danny? Is that the way you see it?
I think could be great, but I think they're good. Yeah, I do think they'll win it, but it's not going to be easy. That's for sure. I mean, Kyrie is playing amazing basketball, both ends of the court, and Doncic is spectacular as well. I mean, those guys are very, very special right now.
Okay, and then I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about the Jazz. How do you feel about the way it's going so far? As you have a way of doing, you've accumulated draft picks. How do you see the future there?
Yeah, I mean, it's uncertain, and trading players for draft picks is always the easiest part. The hardest part is finding good players and being consistently good over a course of time. And I don't know what our timeline is, but we're trying to find ways to get better all the time.
Well, Danny, we sure appreciate your time and sharing your thoughts with the passing of Bill Walton. What a great one he was. But it's great to hear those stories and be able to hear what he brought to your teams that you had a chance to play with.
And also, Danny, I wanted to tell you, Danny, I always appreciate your responses in my texts. Sometimes I text stupid things, and sometimes I ask stupid questions, but I always appreciate your responses and taking the time to do that, because I do appreciate how busy you are.
Well, I love Portland. It still feels like home, and I miss it, and I like following the Blazers and their success, just being from the early 70s on. I listen to Blazer games all the time, and I still remain a fan. So I'm hoping that the Blazers and Jazz can get back in the running with all these good teams in the playoffs sometime soon in the near future. But I appreciate you guys calling me. I mean, Bill was very, very special. He was a great teammate, a great person, as you know, very peculiar guy. And he will for sure be missed. And at the same time, he will always be remembered.
Well, Danny, we appreciate it. Have a great day, and thank you for sharing your thoughts.
All right, guys. Good day.
There you go. Danny Ainge won 2 championships, a part of that 86 Celtics team that Larry Bird said he would put that team up against any team that's ever played. That's how good they were. But Bill helped put that team over the top because what he brought off the bench with his unselfishness. An unselfish team that added Bill Walton, they became more unselfish.
Yeah. Fairly good move. I love the idea that Red Auerbach was more than willing to ignore a few things that the doctors found. It's like, no, I think we can get another year or 2 from this guy.
Yeah. If it means winning a championship.
What a great gamble. Huh?
It paid off.
Yeah, it did.
It was terrific. All right. Big thanks to Danny Ainge. When we come back, I'm going to see if I can go find David Lucas, and we'll continue the celebration of Bill Walton. Dwight and Chad with you. Chris Burkhardt, you got the Rip City Drive. I don't think Bill Walton appreciated the fact that Danny Ainge didn't really care for the Grateful Dead.
No, but not everybody was fans of the Dead, at that time.
I'm not down with their music.
No, I am not either. It's always been kind of a cult, I thought. He saw more than 1,000 performances. And you think you're something only seeing the Eagles 25, 30 times.
Yeah, the difference is he didn't pay for each and every one of those shows he went to.
Yeah,
he might have reconsidered if he had to buy tickets.
Yeah, he went to the back door.
If the Eagles were willing to give me free tickets to every show, I'd travel around the country and go to thousands, no question about it.
Yeah.
I thought that was pretty cool that Danny Ainge said, hey, I'm pulling for the Celtics. I've got friends there. I'm closely connected to the franchise. A lot of guys in his position would not admit to that. They would say, oh, no, I'm not really pulling for anyone. I have no interest. It doesn't matter to me. But for Danny, you can tell, that his closeness to the franchise, because he spent so many years there as a player and as an executive, it matters to him, and the people matter to him. So I think that's cool that he was like, no, I'm pulling for the Celtics.
It also matters that his son works for him.
Yes.
That helps, too.
And that's a big deal.
Yeah.
And so I think that was pretty cool.
His son, I think, coached their G League team for a while.
I don't know if you know the name of the procedure or not, but I remember, I had talked to Bill multiple times throughout my radio career. I had a chance to interview him a number of times. I saw him at Moda Center a number of times. But there was something different about the encounter I had. This is probably back in like 2013, maybe it was 2012. He was tormented by his body, Godfather. You know that, in immense pain. At one time, it considered suicide because of the pain that he was experiencing. His back, his feet, his legs, everything. Life at 7 feet plus is not easy. And for Bill, he had chronic issues. But I remember running into him at the media center there at Moda one night, 2012, 2013. And we were both getting a cup of water. And I asked him, I said, Bill, how are you doing? And he turned around with that Bill Walton smile. He's like, I have never felt better. Life is terrific. And then he acquiesced for like 5 minutes. And it's because he had had some treatments and gotten a procedure done, which gave him his life back, less pain, so he could be more mobile and be able to broadcast and really travel and do the things that he wanted to do, either with his life or around the game of basketball. And it was so great to see that after knowing what he had experienced, to finally get to a point where he was able to find some comfort to be able to manage so he could proceed forward. And that was really cool. That was the first time I had seen Bill on the other side of that. And I'm glad that he had that leading up to the time over the last 10 years that he had, because, he became quite a powerhouse on television by being able to continue to broadcast. And if he had not found the relief to be able to do that, he may have had to shut it down.
Oh, yeah. No, worse than that. I mean, he talked about contemplating suicide. He was in so much pain. And he told me before that procedure, he said, if this doesn't work, this is kind of a Hail Mary. If this one doesn't work, I don't know what I'm going to do. And the way he explained it to me, he's basically got a cage inside his back that's kind of holding everything together. And he was fortunate enough to be pain-free, I think, for quite a few of those years after that. So I think that helped bring all of that joy out in him, is the idea that he could finally walk down the street, get back on his bike, and ride all he wanted without feeling that enormous pain.
All right. Tell me about Bill, the basketball player. We know that he and Lou Alcindor are the two best college basketball players of all time. It's not really disputed. They really set the mark. And then he transitioned in the NBA with Portland, where he became the best player in the league, won a championship. Then he experienced a lot of injuries, but reinvented himself as a six-man with the Celtics to win another championship. Talk to me about him as a player, because you loved the way he played the game. But what were some of the things that jumped out about the way he approached it?
Totally unselfish, great passer, like a terrific outlet passer. The Blazers had a dominating fast break in 77 and 78, and that was because of his outlet passing. He could get a rebound off the board, spin in the air, and hit you with a two-hand over-the-head pass at midcourt, and you were off to the races. He was terrific at that. He was clever, behind-the-back bounce passes, everything you'd want to see. Things that you saw later from, if people are familiar with Sabonis, same kind of stuff, only probably more of it and probably a little sharper. But he would come down the floor. Like Danny mentioned, he wasn't a point guard. He would come down the court signaling and calling plays for his teammates. Now, you don't see centers doing that. Even Jokic, you'll see him hand signaling to people on where he wants them to be, but Bill's actually calling plays, and Ramsey gave him the freedom to do that. And by the way, Jack set up a perfect system for his skills, to be able to be at the high post, uh, dealing passes to cutters and people open in the corners coming off screens. It was a magnificent thing to watch and probably the most beautiful basketball I've ever seen in my life.
So quite possibly the best passing big man of all time.
I believe so. Yes, I believe so.
And he also threw the best outlet pass of all time.
Yeah, like half court or three-quarter court outlet passes. And but you mentioned it earlier. He's playing chess and everybody else is playing checkers. He saw the game so much better. And I think that's what Jokic is doing right now. Jokic is able to see the game better. And some guys just have that ability in their mind to anticipate things that are going to happen and then play to that anticipation and put people in the right spot with their passing. And, of course, he could always score when he needed to, too. He was terrific as a post player. As 21 for 22 in an NCAA finals game might show you, he was an outstanding offensive player.
That game against Memphis is probably the greatest college basketball game ever played.
Yeah.
Missed one shot, 21 of 22, 44 points. They win the championship. He was part of an 88-game winning streak, which is ridiculous. And he didn't experience a loss from the end of his high school career up until his senior year of college.
Yeah, and people wondering, that's 21 for 22 when dunks were not legal. They changed the rules basically for Lou Alcindor, Kareem. They changed the rules outlawing dunks there for a while, and so he wasn't able to do that. His shots were all legitimate field goals from two-point range because they didn't have the three either.
He also owns one of the greatest stat lines of all time. If you go back to Game 6 of the 1977 NBA Finals when the Blazers clinched and won their only championship, Bill in that game, Godfather, played 42 minutes, 8 of 15 from the floor, finished with 20 points, pulled down 23 rebounds, had 7 assists and 8 blocks. I mean, that's awesome.
That's silly stuff. 8 blocks in a game like that where he's playing against unbelievable talent. The other team had Hall of Famers on it, too. I mean, we're talking about Dr. J blocking him, and a tremendous team. Daryl Dawkins, Doug Collins. You can go down the list of all the great players on the Sixers.
How unforeseen was that run for the Trailblazers in 77 with Walton to get through the Lakers and Kareem in the Western Conference Finals, but then also to take out the team in Philadelphia with Dr. J and Daryl Dawkins in the championship.
And they swept the Lakers on the way, too. It was unexpected, Chad, in that that group had never been in the playoffs. And this was back in the time, which was decades, where they said you couldn't win on your first time in. You had to get close, and then you'd win later. They won that year, and nobody quite realized, because of the injuries, how good Bill Walton would be. They just didn't have any clue that he would be that good because he suffered through injuries. He didn't get a lot of time on the floor, obviously. So it came as a surprise. And the supporting cast was way better than people thought. And, of course, that was the year they added in the ABA dispersal draft, they added Maurice Lucas and Dave Twardzik, 2 key figures in their starting lineup that season.
How great was it for Bill to have John Wooden in college and then transition to the NBA where you get Dr. Jack?
Yeah, he played for 2 basketball geniuses, really. And you can't say anything bad about John Wooden. He was the greatest college coach of all time and proved it. But then to play for Jack Ramsey, too, was a real special thing for him. He erected a platform to show Bill's absolute best strengths.
All right, here's what we're going to do. David Lucas is now in the building, so we'll take a break, and then when we come back, we'll continue on and sharing our memories, celebration of life of Bill Walton. Very excited to have David Lucas in studio. He called him a father figure, and so we're going to get some great stories and what he meant to David. That's coming up next as we continue here on the Rip City Drive with Dwight and Chad. All right, we're celebrating the life of Bill Walton today, and very happy to have the opportunity to have David Lucas in studio, someone that knew him extremely well. David, thanks for your time, my friend. I appreciate you coming in.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
So I guess we'll start with this, just your reaction, some of your thoughts and feelings when you got the news that Bill had passed away.
Oh man, it was probably the second hardest day yesterday. I took it like it was my dad, and like uncontrollable emotions, and it was very very hard day yesterday. Just I didn't know that he was fighting cancer. One, and two, I didn't know that he was gonna pass. So when I found out, I didn't believe it was true. So I called my mom. She knew about it, and she knew about his cancer too. And I just broke down, and it was a tough day.
What was your relationship like with him, David? Going all the way back, how close were you, and how did you see him?
Well, we grew up. I've known Bill all my life, and his kids, and we looked at Bill as another father figure, and so just being around him, all the events and all-star games, and in the locker room, and traveling with them, and going to San Diego and visiting them, it was tough to see and to hear that, and to not be able to say goodbye. I think that was like the toughest thing, is to know, that he's passed. And, there's a lot of people that were just shocked, but that just goes to show you, Bill lived to be positive and full of energy. And, no matter how much adversity you might go through, like, he always powered through it. And he lived like that. He was, he said he's the world's luckiest man. And he acted like that every day. So he didn't want people to feel sorry for him, to be blowing him up, and for his last whatever be about him, and he wanted to continue to live his life how he was.
What type of advice would he give you? I mean, from your younger days up until the time you were in college and older now, running the foundation and stuff, like, what were some of the things that Bill would tell you? Because as you put it in your post today, he was a father figure, like a second dad.
I think the biggest thing was just being strong, being strong, being positive. And he always said, your dad would be extremely proud of you. Know that, right? And, I hear that from everyone, but from him saying it, it just hits differently. When he looks you dead in the eye, he's like, your dad will be proud of you, right? You're doing an amazing job. You keep it up. And he said that when I was playing at Oregon State, and I, was a walk-on and earned a scholarship. And then I was playing against Luke Walton when he was at Arizona, and my dad and him would be in the stands talking, to be in the newspaper, Lucas versus Walton. And, Luke would always get the upper hand because they were stacked during that time. But, I just enjoyed those times together, from the Hall of Fame, the Oregon Hall of Fame award, when my dad got inducted into the Hall of Fame. My dad left the house, forgot his shoes. And Bill, we were walking down the street downtown, and Bill, was like, I could take my shoes off, but, he has bigger feet. But he was screaming like, Maurice Lucas, the greatest Blazer of all time, as we're walking to the...
He had a way of doing that a lot.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
He was just loud, and he loved my dad, and he just thought my dad was one of the greatest Blazers of all time and the greatest teammate he's ever had. And he said that religiously. It's been, 48 years or something? And he's always said the same thing that he said back then, now. And he's kept my dad's legacy going.
Now, do you have a favorite memory of your time with Bill? Is there something that kind of stands out as you think back?
Bill would correct me all the time, like my father would. He would correct me. Like Brian Grant or Jerome Kersey one time said, he's like, hey, because I was hot at my gala, so I took my jacket off and I had my tie on. And he's like, young fella, put your jacket back on. I was like, I'm sweating. I'm hot. It's like I'm sweating now. He's like, don't ever break character. Put your jacket on, just ride it out. But Bill would be like, hey, listen, I got two things for you. I need you to stand up straight and never lean into the mic, and talk straight and bring the mic to you, and always stand with your shoulders out. Be firm. And then he's like, never refer to your mom as your stepmom. Your mom, she raised you at age 9 or 10, she's your mom, so call her your mom. And so like things like that always stuck with me because he just said it so like straightforward and like boom, it felt like it was my dad. Um, so there's so many memories when it comes to Bill.
We got David Lucas in studio celebrating the life of Bill Walton. What was that friendship like between your father and Bill?
Oh man, these joints would talk story after story after story, and just their interaction together and the way they communicated it was special, man. To think that they won a championship. They met in '76, and they are still friends throughout, and Bill's still talking about him to this day. It just shows you the impact that my dad had on Bill Walton's life. He named his son Luke Walton after my dad, and Luke had a big poster, a picture of my dad above his bed for 10 plus years. And I remember him going to Luke's school and talking to the kids. Any kind of bullying or anything going on at school, whether it's the Walton kids or us as and my siblings, my dad would be there to be the enforcer. And that stuck with us forever.
I have to say, David, I've heard from so many of the 77, 78 Blazers about the role your father ended up taking in keeping that group together, the bond of those guys for all those years after with the reunions.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was Twardzik that told me, yeah, Luke's on the phone again, just reminding me, yeah, this is the date. You're going to be there, right? And it just kind of, and I think that's a special thing. That's a bond that all those guys had with each other. And it's so special. And they always said, and I think a couple of those guys said, I was kind of surprised it was Luke that did that because he didn't seem like the guy that would do that. But he had that team in his heart, and he really believed in it. And I think that was his relationship with Bill, too, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That was a special team, man. Those guys were bonded and attached to the hip, off on the court, and they had each other's backs, man. It was never a time where one be like, well, so I'm going to the bus. Y'all better get there. If you're not up, you guys are going to miss the bus. It was like, no. Lionel Hollins knocking on the door, opening up, packing my dad's bags, getting him ready. Let's go, Luke. Come on. We got to catch the plane, on a regular basis. And they held each other accountable, and they were there for each other. And it just, to be down 2 and my dad getting a fight, and then all of a sudden they win 4 in a row. Like, that's crazy. Like, it's been 40-something years, almost 50 years since they won the championship.
Now, if Bill had held up, we talk about this all the time. What do you think? What kind of dynasty would that have been?
They could have won 2 or 3 more championships.
Yeah.
Like,
they were going to win one the next year.
Oh,
they were
for
50
sure,
and 10, right?
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. They were like that 77 championship was just the beginning. Like, they were going to roll, and they thought they did. And, Bill's been through so much adversity, man. Can you imagine being hurt almost every season after that and not being able to play every game? Like, it just goes to show you, it was almost 50 surgeries or something like that. Like, he was at 31 at one point. And it's like surgery after surgery after surgery. And I remember Bill telling me a story. He's like, man, I remember I was out for like 9 months, couldn't walk, back was jacked up. And then, I was doing rehab, treatment. And then all of a sudden I got cleared. First thing I do, I get on my bike and I'm riding down the street. I pulled out of my driveway and my neighbor pulled in and almost hit, and he fell and broke everything again.
Yeah.
Like, that's crazy. Like, talk about, like, I would just give up throwing the towel.
Yeah.
Not Bill.
He kept going. We always talk about his basketball greatness, and he was a phenomenal player. But I think one of the biggest accomplishments in life for him was the way that he overcame the speech impediment and faces fear to become a phenomenal broadcaster, because that would be hard for anyone to do, but he did that, and you had a chance to see that entire process play out. What did you think about the courage that he showed to overcome the impediment to be able to become a broadcaster of all things?
I think we should all look at that and be like, damn, if Bill can do this,
I can do anything.
You can do anything. Because he was slurring, spitting, and like all the treatments and surgeries, to correct that. And for him to then be shy and embarrassed to talk in front of the camera. My dad's doing all the talking at one point. and then, Bill's trying to get stuff out, but, he didn't want to be around the camera at one point, it's truly amazing that he was able to overcome that.
I tell people a lot, Bill's early years, he was not a good interviewer. And nobody can believe that because they see, the modern Bill Walton that was so different. But he was almost sullen. I think you saw him in those years where he was just kept to himself, kind of, wasn't really
He was
involved.
a hippie, man. He was.
He
like,
was. He
He was
was.
going to Grateful Dead. He was in the hills, meditating and riding his bike all over the Oregon coast and all over the place. Like, he was to himself. That's what he wanted to be. And that was his way of coping with everything that he was going through.
Really ahead of his time in terms of being an activist and standing up for what he believed in and being able to face criticism by standing up what you believe in. Like, there's a lot of guys that do that now, but Bill was doing it at a time when that was
70s.
unacceptable. Yeah.
In the 70s. And, I was watching the documentary, The 30 for 30, and it's just so amazing. Every time I see it, I just get chills on what he went through. And
Did you learn anything new from that documentary?
oh man, absolutely. They're digging up all kinds, because I remember ESPN called us and were like, "Hey, do you have any other photos that nobody has seen? Any videos? Any film?" So I know that they were calling everyone, trying to dig up as much new stuff as they could. But I learned a lot, and they're at our house interviewing us.
Didn't you like when they took him back to Northwest Portland and he's playing with those kids in Wallace Park?
Oh man!
I mean, I remember those days when people say, "Hey, Walton's playing in the park again."
Who does that?
I know.
Like,
It's
People
amazing.
aren't doing that right now.
No.
Just showing up. I've seen it though. People are doing it, but it's just not as common. But that's what Bill was. That's who he was about. He's a free spirit. Just believed in what he believed in, and he lived it.
Dwight and I were talking about this. One of the most unselfish basketball players of all time. And just look at the way the 77 team played with your pops and with Bill, or when he went to the Celtics as a sixth man and took on that role and perfected it. I mean, he played the game at a different level, the right way. Like, he was playing chess, but he didn't care about scoring. He just wanted to do whatever he could to help his team win. You don't see a lot of that nowadays.
No, man, he was selfless. He was one of the most selfless individuals I've seen. And just the fact of him coming to our gala every single year and making it a mission to not miss one just shows you, like, he's like, I'm committed, I'm supporting. And he was so busy at some times, and he made it happen, come in and leave right after the gala. So, and he's missed some big things, Hall of Fame things and stuff, just to come to our event.
Yeah, a unique person and a unique personality, I thought, too. I thought you mentioned hippie, and I always thought that, too. But he was the best of the hippie generations.
Oh, the best.
Peace and love,
Oh,
and
peace and love.
he was all about peace and love. When you look back, that's what he's talking about. And he's trying to bring everybody peace and love.
Yeah.
Even Indians on a reservation somewhere in Wyoming or something. It's incredible where he went to try to spread that doctrine.
Yep, and peace and love, like, all the way through. He's been fighting this disease for months, and the fact that he didn't want anybody to know, and he didn't want it to be about him, and he wanted to continue to live the way he lived, is just truly powerful. Because he could have put that out, everyone could have been feeling sorry for him. Message, it would have been all about him every single day. Hey, how you doing? How you doing with the cancer stuff? Like, my dad went through it. I know exactly how it goes, and it's overwhelming. And it's sometimes better just to focus on yourself and work on that and not make it public.
So he stayed true to the end then.
He did.
All right, David Lucas is in studio. Do you have time to stay for another segment, my friend? All right, David Lucas is here. If you'd like to jump on board and share any thoughts on Bill Walton, 503-248-0620. We're going to talk to Dave Twardzik. He's going to join the show at 5:20. More with David Lucas as we continue our celebration of the life of Bill Walton here on the Rip City Drive. All right, we're celebrating the life of Bill Walton, who passed away yesterday at the age of 71. David Lucas is in studio with us right now, and I would imagine, as sad as this time is for you, David, the last 24 hours between family and friends, it's got to be nice to have everyone sharing all their different Bill stories with you, right?
Absolutely. And I think that I probably got 300 text messages, at least 300 text messages with pictures and stuff. And a lot of the photos are from our gala, interactions that they've had with Bill. And, some of them, like just like my Aunt Dorothy, she just sent me pictures because my mom and my dad got married at their house in the 80s. So
Those pictures are awesome, by the way.
So Bill was there looking like a hippie, and the whole team, and they're in all white, and it was like Hawaiian themed. So they had they were decked out, but it was pretty cool to see.
I think it's great that he stayed true to himself till the end. He didn't want to tell anyone because he didn't want people to feel sad for him and make it about him. I respect people, even if they believe or operate in a different way than I do. If they're true to who they are, I'm totally down with that, man. And that's what Bill was. It's like what you saw was what you got with Bill Walton.
And he was the
and we
same.
respect it. Yeah, the same all the time.
Day in and day out, he was the same. And I think that's why people really, really wanted to be around him, to hear him talk, because he's the most educated man I've known. Like, his house is full of books, and he reads on a consistent basis, and he's knowledgeable about so many different things, and he's had so many life lessons, and he's been pretty cool.
His mom was a librarian, and his dad was a social worker. That's
Yeah.
not a traditional sports family, is it?
And I don't think they were that interested in basketball, were they? I don't think they weren't the parents that were there for every game and every practice and all that stuff. I never got that impression.
No. I think that, back then it was just a different time, right? And everyone had their hobbies and played their things. And, I remember my dad, being in that situation where he's like, okay, he only had basketball. Like, that's all he had was basketball to get out of that situation. And he utilized that. But I'm just happy that him and my dad became such close friends, and that Bill was the amazing person that he was.
Did you ever go to a Grateful Dead concert with him?
I never went. I was going to ask him. I was like, man, I want to go with you. But it's just like spontaneous. Like, he'll have a gap, he'll go, and then just enjoy it. And that was his thing. So, I never wanted to jump on there and do it, but I've never been there. I would love to go.
You were just showing us a picture of you and Bill together. I think it was at Motor Center. You said it was during one of the PK80 events.
Yeah.
You love that picture, and you posted it today, but talk about that time.
He hit me up, and he's like, hey, you want to go to the PK80 games? And I was like, yeah. He's like, I got another ticket if you want to bring somebody. And I'm like, okay. So I went to the game, sat on the floor, and I wore my dad's Marquette Letterman jacket. And it has a big M, and it looks like Michigan.
Yeah.
Right? And they're playing Michigan State. So I'm wearing this jacket next to Bill, and they put me on the Jumbotron. And all of a sudden I heard, boo! And I'm looking around, and then I got text messages like, they're booing you. Somebody tapped me from behind, like, they're booing you. I'm like, what? And they're like, they think it's a Michigan jacket. And I'm like, oh, no. So I went to the scores table, or the announcer's table, and I told him, I was like, this is my dad's Letterman jacket from Marquette University. It looks like Michigan, but it's not Michigan. I'm for Michigan State right now. And it was a championship game. So they announced it or whatever, and people were texting me. But it was crazy to get booed by the entire stadium.
I'm surprised Bill didn't walk over to the PA mic and let everyone know.
Yeah,
it's
grab it.
Marquette.
I know, I wish. I think he didn't notice it until later anyways.
Okay, you mentioned earlier, David, that you didn't have a chance to say goodbye. If you had the chance, what is it that you would have said to him?
Oh, man, I'll just say I love you, and you impacted my life in so many different ways. And I appreciate your friendship with my father, our family, keeping my father's legacy, alive, and constantly talking about my father, till you're blue in the face almost every week when he was on air. And he's a truly amazing, one-of-a-kind person, and that, his legacy is going to live on forever.
And he took a more active role with you after Luke died, right?
Yeah, he was like, okay, you started the foundation, let's go. Bill Russell, we gave the Enforcer Award. the very first year. And after that, it was like he was presenting the Enforcer Award every single year, and he made it a point to put this script together and to announce it and to just be there, man. It was so impactful because Bill wasn't coming to a lot of events here. Like if you're here, like he wasn't coming here at all at one
Yeah,
point,
that's right.
right? And
Yeah.
so I called the Blazers. I'm like, I got Bill Walton coming. Can you guys piggyback off him? I remember you doing a 30-minute thing, him and the
We
Lionel
did.
Hollins.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So and then the Blazers started like piggybacking off of Bill being here, and then got him back involved, and he's at games and stuff. So it's been quite of a journey the last 14 years.
I appreciate your work with the franchise to try and bring back some of the key alumni. I sure love seeing those guys back around.
Yeah.
Seeing Bill or, hopefully one day Clyde. The guys that we grew up loving, right?
Man, I've
They're
been
part of
working
Rip
on
City
Clyde.
forever.
I talked to him a few days ago for quite some time, and it's like I call him just randomly just to check in, right? Don't need nothing from him, but just to check in with him because me being on the sidelines, being a ball boy in the late 80s, and Clyde, Terry Porter, Jerome, Cliff Robinson, all those guys, Buck Williams, like that was a big part of my childhood. And I've been trying to get Clyde here for forever. And I know he doesn't like galas, and he's with the big three, he's traveling and stuff. He doesn't have the time anymore, but I know when the big three is over, he's going to be here. But he's coming in town on the 20th of July for the big three event at Moda. So I'm definitely going to make sure I see him, and I'm still going to be working on getting him here to support, and the community needs him, needs his presence.
No, we do. And I think that the passing of Bill is a great reminder. It's like we're never prepared to deal with the loss of life, and it can happen at any time, right? So it's like I want these guys to be reconnected to the community.
It's almost like we got to do something really big for Clyde. Like, we got to get him here. It can't just be like, oh, we want you to make an appearance. Like, we got to do something for him. Like, he's got the street. We got to, like, do a big old, same with Bill Walton. Let's get a big statue. Let's start putting out some statues of these people so they'll always be in there. And
Aren't you amazed that they don't have any statues of
man.
anybody there?
they got the Rip City thing.
Yeah.
They got that people taking pictures. Imagine having a big Clyde Drexler statue or Bill Walton or Maurice
Clyde,
Lucas.
Jack Ramsey.
Yeah, Jack Ramsey,
dad,
Bill Schonley announcing.
Yeah, no question.
It's a no-brainer because that would make at least part of the Rose Quarter area destination point. We were talking about this recently on the show where you could really do it up nicely and have those statues with a little plaque to talk about their time as a trailblazer, and people could walk around, take pictures, and be able to remember. Because think about this. There's a whole generation of basketball fans now that they only know Bill, the announcer. They don't know that Bill was a great basketball player.
Absolutely.
Isn't that
We-
crazy?
We spend a lot of time trying to educate them about the 77 team. Oh, those guys couldn't. No, they were playing against a bunch of auto mechanics and plumbers. They weren't playing against real. You would not believe some of the stuff we hear about basketball in those days.
And that's just for everybody. Like, you look at Michael Jordan, and you look at,
Yeah.
the 70s, the 80s,
Yeah.
the 90s, and everyone's got like, well, this was my era, so I feel like this was like the best basketball ever.
Yeah.
So just seeing Bill Russell move and how he played, like crazy, and Wilt Chamberlain and Bill Walton, like all these guys played at a crazy high level, and people are like, oh, I won't transition to today's game, blah, blah, blah. Like, nah. The enforcer, my dad's going to be able to play in this game. He's going to get buckets, and he's going to be physical. And that bothers me a lot. But we definitely need some statues of some of our, standouts for the Blazers.
You got the most power of anybody in this room. You go to work on it, and we'll back you up because
All right.
we're there. I'm telling you.
I know we definitely need to make that happen. I'm seeing like the Lakers do it. Shaq's hanging from the top of the ceiling.
They got
shattering.
Chick Hearn in a statue out there,
Yeah.
which they should. That's fine.
But you would
Yeah.
think Portland, of all places, just look at the number of jerseys that have been retired and the love that's been given to the 77 championship team, and rightfully so. The statue is the next logical step in the process.
Yeah, it's natural, and I don't understand what the holdup is. But like the banner's great, your retired banner, but we need to put some of the greats that like have that people remember, and it needs to be a destination spot.
No question. We love this stat line here from Game 6 of the 77 championship, the clincher for the Trailblazers. Bill Walton David, 42 minutes, 20 points, 23 rebounds, 7 assists, and 8 blocks.
God,
How's that for a clincher?
Is that pretty
oh
good?
my God!
Does
Talk
that
about
sound good?
8
Talk-
blocks.
2 more, he would have just had a. That man was amazing, and I was watching video today, and because I got to be reminded of, just watching people's testimonies on Bill Walton and all the highlights, and it amazes me. Like Mike Richardson did the Bill Russell documentary, and sold to Netflix, but didn't really understand Bill Russell's game until I watched this documentary and what he really went through and all the footage and stuff. And it's like, I don't know how a player can play the professional basketball game and then go through those things at the same time. It's pretty amazing.
I loved how he would block a shot and keep it in play. He wasn't blocking shots up into the third row.
Right.
He would block a shot and catch it, fast break, there they go. Celtics running down the court.
Automatic.
Yeah.
It was like, man, I'm not throwing it in the stands and trying to get a highlight reel. I'm catching it, keeping it in play, and I'm going to get a bucket on the other side. So that's just the mentality these guys had.
How close are you with Bill's kids?
I'm probably closest to Luke. I talked to him the other day. Randomly, one of my board members was in Colorado or something, and she FaceTimed me and look up, it was Luke Walton. He's like, hey. And just seeing Luke, man, because I remember him as a kid, right?
Yeah.
So, like, even when I saw him after Arizona, when he started coaching, or when he played professional, then he coached. And it's like, dude, you're a grown man. He's like, I am a grown ass man. Like that's like, and he, deep voice, and it's just crazy to see him. He was at the PK 80 games, and I got to see him. And every time Bill announced, I would be there, and he would walk me over and say, "Let's go say hi to Luke, real quick." And we'd walk over. He'd be coaching the Lakers or coaching whatever team it was. And he always made it a point to, like, I'll be uncomfortable, walk across the floor at a Blazer game and go say hi, and nobody stopped us. And I was like, he's like, come on, let's go. I'm like, dang it. So he always made me feel, but he always was I'm going to do this and ask for forgiveness later.
I just hope that, on some level, you and Luke are able to continue the connection that your father and Bill shared together.
Yeah, absolutely. I know he's mourning, and, this is a tough time for him and his entire family.
And you know exactly what he's going through.
Oh, I know exactly what he's going through. So I know that, like, I got bombarded too, and it was a lot. It was overwhelming, and I wasn't able to grieve like I wanted to grieve because I was so tied up in, like, responding to people and writing speeches and doing this and doing that. So definitely it's going to take some time for them to deal with all this and set the memorial service, because it's not really calming until after the memorial services are all done. And we had 3 of them. So I can't imagine what people are going to be doing for Bill Walton.
Well, David, we appreciate you coming by. No, it's a difficult time. We're sorry for your loss. You obviously much closer to Bill than we were, but he meant so much to everyone in this area in Rip City. Yeah. And he will forever, be remembered, but we appreciate you taking time.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right. David Lucas is with us. We'll continue. Kerry Agers is going to join us next as we continue the celebration of life of Bill Walton. You got the Rip City Drive with Dwight and Chad. Well, it's a good day. I got two of my favorite guys in the studio. The Dean of Portland Sports, Kerry Agers, is joining us now, and his piece on Bill Walton is going to be up later today on his website, kerryagers.com. The Dean is here. Kerry, thanks for coming by. It's great to see you, my friend.
Thanks for inviting me, Chad. Now, all I ask you guys is you helicopter me home after the interview.
Yeah, so you can avoid the traffic. I
Just
know.
go out there and stand in the parking lot and wait, Kerry. It'll be a long.
I know
no
from
doubt.
hearing from Dwight, going back towards your side of town at this time of day can be a little dicey sometimes on I-5.
Yes, it can.
Well, it's great to hear that you were working on your piece on Bill last night, but how often can you say that you got everyone that you wanted to get to be able to talk to? That doesn't happen very often, does it?
You know, and it speaks to the respect that people have for Walton, the guys that played with him, the guys that knew him well. Everything wasn't perfect through his career. He wasn't always the greatest teammate, but he was a guy that they respected tremendously and learned to love through the years.
Was there a common theme that popped up in all the different people you spoke with in putting the piece together?
Two words, I would say. One, teammate, great teammate, and incredible competitor, not just in basketball, but in everything. They talked about playing volleyball and tennis and all that kind of stuff. The guys that knew him well, the guys like Johnny Davis and Lana Hollins, I think they might have been the closest besides Lucas.
Yeah.
There was a fantastic amount of respect for the type of person he was and the type of player he
Well,
was.
maybe you and Dwight can talk about this. Dwight was telling me that his early days in Portland after he came here, couldn't play much, was dealing with injuries. Like, there was a thought that we got to get this guy out of town before they went on their big run.
You remember when Doug Lemire went on television and said they ought to trade him for a 6-pack of carrot juice?
Ewell Gibbons and a pack of carrot juice.
Yeah.
And that's because of the injuries, right? What was the deal there?
Well, not just because of the injuries, because of his lifestyle. I mean, he had a counterculture lifestyle that a lot of the older generation didn't appreciate. And in fact, the Blazers didn't appreciate. If you remember in 1974, well, you don't remember, Dwight remembers in 1975 when Patty Hearst was kidnapped and sent across the country with Jack and Mickey Scott, who happened to live with Bill Walton. And there was a press conference in San Francisco, and Bill got up and said, "Stand with us against the U.S. government and the FBI as crooks and all this stuff."
Yeah,
and
that happened.
Harry Glickman and Larry Weinberg had to issue a statement. We don't agree with Bill Walton on this, and this is their #1 draft pick, for crying out loud.
Do you really? I mean, that story's been around for a long time. You think they sheltered Patty Hearst for a while?
Yeah, they did. I knew Jack pretty well. I didn't know John Bassett, his attorney, very well, but I did know Jack pretty well.
And he admit to it?
No, he didn't know. He didn't admit it to me. I won't say that, but I think they did. Yeah.
So what was the team stance on that? Because this came from a day and age where athletes didn't really do that.
That's true, Chad. But like I said, he's their #1 pick. I mean, they had to live with it, and they knew, once. Well, first of all, Lenny Wilkins was his coach the first couple years, and Lenny loved him. And Lenny, I talked to him later. He says, I felt like I was a part of that championship, but they couldn't keep him healthy. Finally, he got healthy, and Jack Ramsey was aboard and Nirvana. But they couldn't give up on it. Let's put it that way. They could have, I guess, but they weren't going to.
I was going to ask you about your interviews with him over the years, because I recall when he first got here, the stuttering was a problem. He was shy as all get out, coming from UCLA, where they didn't really allow players to have much media interaction. And he was a loner. He was by himself a lot. Even his teammates, I remember, had some questions there about him. You recall that?
All that is true. It's in my story that I wrote. I spent a lot of time yesterday talking to all these people. It'll be posted tonight on kerryagers.com. And in reading back, Dwight, I did a story in 1990, amazingly, that he allowed me and a photographer to go in and spend a day with him in San Diego. He had been very, as Dwight said, very uncooperative with the media. And there was some questions from guys like Larry Steele and Dave Twardzik and Bob Gross and some of those players and Dave Twardzik. All these guys, well, we're not sure about this guy, But anyway, I wrote he allowed me to go down there. And the reason he did, I think, was because 2 months earlier, they had retired his jersey, and he kind of made amends with the Blazers, and I caught him in a weak moment. And so it was a fun day to be down there and get to his kids, all 4 boys. It was just at the time when he was separated from his first wife, Susan, and was still living in this huge mansion house in prime real estate in San Diego. The boys were 9 to 14 years old. I got to watch him play a touch football game with his dad, and shoot. Bill could not get around at all. His foot was in terrible shape then. As he said, I have to go from chair to chair. So it was quite a time. It was a real transitional time. I think the headline was midlife crisis. He was 37 years old, and of course he came back and had a second career and was pretty successful with that, right?
Yeah, there's no question. I think that's one of the most amazing accomplishments in his life. You guys knew him when he was quiet and had the stutter. What was it like for you to see him make the transition to becoming a guy that wouldn't shut up because he wanted to talk all the time? That's amazing to me.
Well, I'm not going to say that I knew him really because I didn't cover the Blazers. Dwight actually didn't when he was there either. We came along later. Both of us were involved in the '77 coverage of the championship season. They pulled. Had other beats, but it was all hands on deck, and sidebars as the playoffs and that sort of thing. So we were around him a little bit, but I didn't really know him. I mean, I knew he was stuttering because I'd seen film of it, but I didn't know him at all, really.
But, Kerry, like me, you heard the stories from other guys on
sure.
that team.
Yeah.
And I heard a lot from those other guys talking about there was some tough times there where I think there was one picture I saw, they were in an airport, and all the team was over here on one side, and there was Bill over here by himself with his jars of whatever, carrot juice and honey and all that stuff because he was vegetarian at the time, which was also, that's a little edgy at that point. People were wondering, well, of course he's breaking bones. He's not getting enough protein. That's the problem. And you're hearing all these things at the same time. And I know his teammates had some concerns about him at that point, whether he was going to eventually fit in. But, of course, once he got healthy, everything fit real nice.
We got the Dean of Portland Sports, Kerry Eggers, here in studio celebrating the life of Bill Walton. His piece on Bill Walton will be up on his website, kerryeggers.com, later on today. Dwight and I have talked about this. For that short stretch where he was healthy, they won the championship in '77. He was finals MVP. He was league MVP the next year. They were 50-10 before he suffered the injury. I do believe that no Trailblazer in history has played a better stretch of basketball than that. I mean, how do you look at the all-time Trailblazers? Is it him? Is it Drexler? Do you look at longevity? Like, how is he going to be remembered forever as a Trailblazer?
I personally do look at longevity. I've always resisted the idea that he's the greatest Blazer of all time. You're absolutely right. For the stretch of almost 2 years, he had the highest peak for sure. I still consider Clyde Drexler the greatest player in Blazer history. I think Damian's a close second, and I put Bill third. And that's just a personal decision, like on longevity and what he did for the team. Clyde got the team to the finals twice. Damian never did. Damian's the greatest shooter and scorer in Blazer history for sure, but I still think Clyde would be number one.
Do you agree with the assessment? Most people believe Bill Walton and Lou Alcindor are the two best college basketball players of all time.
I do. I think that, and in my piece, you'll see that several of the people think Bill was the greatest. I still kind of think Kareem was, Lou Alcindor was, but Bill was something else that championship game against Memphis State.
44 points, 21 of 22.
Yeah.
It might be the greatest game ever played.
Yeah. And I guess there was a few he had a couple more that he tipped in that were offensive goaltending or something. I can't remember.
Yeah, well, you couldn't dunk then.
You couldn't dunk.
So he had some tips where his hand was on top of the ball that nowadays would be just a great dunk. No, they disallowed those, so they didn't count. But I was going to ask you, too. See, we have a lot of trouble. There's not a lot of good video of Walton playing normal games. You see some championship videos show up and all that. We have trouble convincing people how good he was. People don't really understand the impact he had on both ends of the floor, his outlet passing, his blocked shots, all the things he did to help a team win, and how unselfish he was. But do you ever run into that, too, where people just don't get it about how, he was unbelievable?
Lionel Hollins talked a lot about that. I talked to Lionel for over a half hour. I mean, he just went on and on. He was very close to Bill and had some great stories. He said that exact same thing. People now that didn't see him, don't understand. Bill doesn't have the stats that some of the other great players did, but he was a winner and he was a team player. He sacrificed a lot for the rest of the team. Dave Twardzik told me that too. So, yeah, I agree that people now, can't really fully appreciate what Bill had done during his career, during those 2 years.
How important do you think it was for Bill and his game to have John Wooden, and then shortly after that, Dr. Jack Ramsey, and the way that those coaches and players fit together?
I think in most ways, John Wooden was a positive. He was disciplined. He took Bill under his wing and really showed him how to play the game. Taught him a lot besides basketball. I think the one thing was he sheltered him and hurt him early in his career. We just talked about how he was not good with the media, and neither was Lou Alcindor, and he was one of the worst I ever dealt with. I did deal with him a few times. So they were both uncooperative early in their careers. I don't think that helped him. I think Jack was very good. The style of play Jack wanted to play, he had played in Buffalo. Hollins told me that when Lenny got fired, he was disappointed initially, and so was Bill. They both liked Lenny. But they liked the way Jack had coached in Buffalo. He had an upbeat style. He was a movement based on movement, less than plays. Most players like to play that way, so it worked out well for him.
I guess that 77 team, we really, it was just a team game. It wasn't about one guy, Bill, being unselfish the way he was. They played the perfect brand of team basketball, which you don't see too often in today's game.
Yeah, it is. It's old school now, but the movement, moving without the ball and back picks and give and goes and back doors and that kind of stuff. They were terrific at that.
How did he develop? We talk about his early struggles in terms of communicating and some of his teammates being unsure. How did that change over time with the success and the winning in terms of the type of teammate he became?
You mean his communication skills?
Yeah, communication or the way he connected with his teammates after the Rocky start.
Marty Glickman, who's a great broadcaster in New York, I don't know if you guys have talked about that with anybody, but when Bill was 28, Marty approached him and helped him with a lot of stuff. I talked to Marv Albert last night, too, and Marv was telling me the story about that, and it had him enunciate things, practice. I did a lot of practicing. He had him chew sugarless gum to work his jaws and that sort of thing.
Wow.
And Bill said it was a life. Bill had the famous quote, I think it was, I learned how to talk, which was the greatest accomplishment of my life and the worst nightmare for everybody else.
Yeah. Well, Marty was a very esteemed broadcast coach at that time.
He did work with a lot of broadcasters.
People would bring him in to work with their broadcasters, and he was a great broadcaster himself. I remember on old videos his voice. He had a very distinctive voice, but yeah, he was really good coaching broadcasters. And I was curious too. I was shocked when Bill turned into this hyperbole, booming, just in your face.
Greatest thing in the history of mankind.
Kerry Eggers, you're the greatest sports writer I've ever heard in my life. You're the most unbelievable. He was just way over the top with all that stuff.
Yeah, I kind of took that with a grain of salt. I had mixed emotions about it. I got a kick out of it, but sometimes I thought, come on, Bill, talk a little bit about the game, will you?
I heard a story from Kevin McHale this morning where, during that 86 championship run with the Celtics, that after every game, Bill would like to crack a beer, and he would come in and, guys, that was the greatest game I've ever been associated with. And then he said the next night, Bill would crack a beer. He goes, guys, that's the greatest game I've ever been associated with. It was the same thing every time.
He just had fun doing it.
Yeah.
You could tell that was the greatest thing. He had fun doing it. People liked him. He really had a transformation in life, the second half of his life. I think it was Wally Walker told me, he says, he stayed away from people, when he was younger. When he got older, his last 40 years, I think he had fun. He went out, he would talk to people. It wouldn't have to be somebody he knew.
Yeah.
And I think that was the better part of Bill Walton.
Well, what really stuck to me when we talked to Danny Ainge earlier, and you spoke to Danny as well, is that, that team was loaded with guys who could play. Dennis Johnson, Larry Bird, McHale, Parrish, all those guys. But like Danny was saying, it's we all admired and looked up to Bill. He was an idol to a lot of those guys. That's how big Bill was when he went to the Celtics on a team loaded that could already make a run for a championship. That tells you what they thought about him, which is impressive to me.
Yeah, the Red Auerbach, when they brought Bill in for a physical, and as you knew, he'd sat out a couple of years with the Clippers. He hadn't played much. He'd been injured, and the doctors were having a discussion on whether they were going to pass Bill's physical, you know. And Red came in and says, "Do you want to play? Do you think you can play?" He's talking to Bill, and Bill goes, "Yeah, I want to play, and I think I can play." "Okay, then we're going to pass you in the physical."
That won't go on in today's world.
I told that to Danny. I said, "That wouldn't work today." And he goes, "Well, I don't know. It might."
Danny might. Yeah, right.
I mean, he's in the position to make it work, I guess. But.
That's true.
Gosh, that's so amazing. Kerry Eggers, the dean of Portland Sports, is in studio. His piece on Bill Walton will be up on his website, kerryeggers.com, later today. What are some of the images or things that you remember most about him, whether it be in conversations you had with him or him as a player? Like, what are the things that stand out to you, Kerry?
Oh, boy. Well, I actually I liked him for a long time. And then we had a couple of incidents where I thought he was kind of rude, and I didn't like him and personally. But I always got a kick out of kind of the way he went about his business. I always thought he was a fun guy. And then the last time I saw him, Chad, was he was a pallbearer at the memorial service for Bill Schonley. And they had a reception out at Waverly, and he was out there, and we talked, and he could not have been nicer. And he said some things to me that made me feel good. And you know, I think he really went out of his way to help a lot of people. The stories I've told, people that he didn't need to help. Rob Kloss told me a story. Rob went biking with him through the state of Oregon. They developed a relationship, and they spent 7 days on bikes. Well, he shows up at the airport, and it's not just him. It's 15 other people, and several of them are Paralympians that he had befriended. Lionel Hollins told me a story, too, about a guy that was living with him for 3 or 4 months, and he was a homeless person that needed help, and Bill brought him in. So I'm sure there were a lot of nice things that Bill did that people didn't know about. He was a gregarious guy, and good for him for doing all that stuff.
Wow, that's pretty awesome.
You know, you talk about negative interviews or whatever, and we had our moments, he and I. And I recall the last book he wrote about his health and recovering and coming back from all that.
Back for the Dead.
Back from the dead. And he was at Powell's doing a signing, and he would not return my text because he knew what I wanted to ask him about. In the book, there were some pretty negative things said about the Blazer medical staff, including Bob Cook, who was the team physician. And everybody I talked to said that stuff was not true, that he went way overboard in describing that. So I went in and I, of course, ambushed him with a camera and got the microphone out, and he's signing books. And I said, "Bill, can I talk to you a minute?" "Yeah, sure, Dwight, come on, yeah." I said, "Bill, I want to talk to you about the book." "Oh, great, great." I said, "Well, there's some stuff in there about Bob Cook, and he's kind of arguing about that. He even told me he might take it to court." And and Bill smiled, and he looked up at me, and he said, "Well, Dwight, it was my book." I said, "Well, okay."
You know, in the story that I did in 1990 for Northwest Magazine, we talked. He didn't want to talk about that, but I wrote about it, and he had filed a suit against Cook and 10 other physicians for $5.6 million. Well, they settled out of court eventually, and sources told me at the time that he got about $50,000. So. And Twardzik said he had nothing but good things to say about Bob Cook. Yeah. Bob Gross had the same thing. Bill, had unfortunate circumstances. I totally get that, but I don't know that I would blame Bob Cook for what happened.
All right, the Dean of Portland Sports, Kerry Eggers, in studio. Your piece on Bill Walton will be up later today at kerryeggers.com.
Yep.
How many guys did you talk to?
16 or 17.
Awesome.
I also got a few people that weren't teammates, so yeah.
Well, we appreciate you coming by, Kerry. You're the best.
Glad to do it. Thanks for having me, guys.
All right, kerryeggers.com. Check out the website so you can check out a story on Bill Walton. We'll keep things rolling. Dave Twardzik going to join the show at 5:20. All right. Big thanks to Kerry Agers, who joined us in studio. Boy, Kerry had a lot of energy today, Godfather. I like that. I like energetic Kerry Agers.
He's good at that stuff. He's got a big Rolodex, too. He's got phone numbers nobody's got.
You just casually name drop Marv Albert.
Yeah.
All right, let's go out to the phones. Rick wants to jump on board. Rick, appreciate the hold. You're up on the Rip City Drive with Dwight and Chad. What's on your mind?
Hi, yeah. I've just been listening to your show tonight, and pretty much, Kerry really hit it right on. I moved here from the Haight-Ashbury, I think a year before Bill moved to Portland, so I felt a certain camaraderie as past Californians. And Californians weren't real welcome in Portland in 1973, 74, 75. And I did spend time with Bill in Northwest Portland and the Scots. Probably my best memory was rafting with Bill and Dr. Cook down the Oahe River when Bill had his cast on. Just as a week after that season got over, Bill put a plastic bag around this cast, and we went down the Oahe River.
Wow.
And he was the only one of all of us on the trip, besides the guy, a fellow by the name of Ken Warren, who Ken would let raft down one particular rapid called Widowmaker.
No.
And otherwise, Ken took all the boats down except he let Bill row by himself, his boat down. And I sat there and could not believe the upper body strength of this guy with a broken leg, a broken foot, sitting in a cast in a class 5 or 6 rapids. And he was so strong that none of the rest of us could get anywhere close to that amount of upper body strength.
Yeah.
That was the thing I remember the best, besides the fact it was a very, very rugged trip. And Cook was on it along with several other doctors. And myself and a friend were there to fill in because they needed a few other people to have enough people to raft it. But I did spend time with him, early on, really before the championship. And he was just a delightful, friendly guy, bashful. I do think that the people of Portland were a little bit tough on him. And I tend to agree with Kerry. I don't think it was so much Dr. Cook as it was just the environment became difficult for him, having to do with his being a hippie, vegetarian. People just didn't understand that in 1974, 75, and thought that must be making him weaker. But, my memories of him are fond. There's no question about it.
Well, Rick, I appreciate you calling in and sharing that story of Bill with a broken leg and a sandwich bag over his cast going down a Widowmaker rapid. That's amazing.
Yeah, no, he was amazing. The later stories were true, and the earlier ones, there were probably less of them. There are less of us still around, but they were amazing even then. So I spent quite a bit of time with him. My wife and I used to play tennis with Dave Twardzik in the old days. Boy, I'll tell you, these guys were really athletic.
Yeah.
No doubt. They could play golf. They could do so many different things. Rick, that's a terrific phone call. How about Bill with a busted leg in a raft going down the Widowmaker? Come on now.
I don't think we're ready for the Widowmaker, you and me, are we?
There are certain things in life I will do. I've jumped out of a plane and went skydiving. That was awesome. But I don't want to drown. That's one way I don't want to die if I can avoid that. So I'm not into, kayaking, rapids. That's just not my game.
I used to do a lot of kayaking, but not in rapids. I'm not going to be the guy to fall out of a boat, hit my head on a rock, and then just never be seen again,
No.
I don't like that.
The most danger I want is having to step a couple of feet off the fairway to hit a chip shot into the green. That's what I care about now.
You're worried about hornets stinging you and stuff like that.
But Haight-Ashbury, so when I was living down in the Bay Area, my philosophy was pretty simple. I got to find a place to get my hair cut, and I'm not going to any of these 2-minute jobs. So I did a Google search, best hair salon in town. And this place popped up, number one, and I checked out a couple of reviews. I was like, that's my spot. So I put in the address, and I'm driving through, and I'm like, what is this place of town that I'm in right now?
Oh, no.
It was Haight-Ashbury.
You didn't know you were headed that way?
I had no idea.
Yeah.
Because I was still learning the whole area and stuff. And before you know it, I wind up in hippie land. And the place.
It was still that way?
Yeah, it's changed a little bit.
Yeah.
But you can tell, just like when you're in Portland, right? If you're in Northwest Portland and you drive to Southeast Portland, it's not going to look anything like where you were just at. And Haight-Ashbury's unique unto itself in the San Francisco area. But I ended up finding my spot, and that's where I drove in to get my hair cut, every month. So it was pretty sweet. Haight-Ashbury. Legendary. Oh, my goodness. But I think that's the thing with basketball players. We see them on TV or you see them in person at a game. They look lanky and tall. But all I know is that when you're 7 feet tall, you're strong. And, that's doesn't surprise me that a guy like Bill would have the arm strength or the upper body strength to be able to man a craft as he's heading down the Widowmaker. That seems very believable. Gosh.
Widowmaker.
Oh, goodness. Dave Twardzik going to join us coming up at 5:20. I can't believe it. Dallas is up 3-0 in the Western Conference Finals. They're going to end the series tonight. It's over.
Yeah.
I'm not surprised that Dallas is winning the series. I'm surprised they're up 3-0. Like Dallas, everything that they've done shouldn't work, and yet it's all worked, and now they're on the verge of going to the NBA Finals. And they're playing defense. And they're doing it with Kyrie and Luka. They're not supposed to be able to do any of this, and they're doing it.
Is this real? This can't be real. I mean,
let me just give you a little recap on some of the key moves the Mavericks have made to be in this position, because I want your take on it, Godfather. It's pretty impressive to me. They traded Spencer Dinwiddie, Dorian Finney-Smith, a 2029 first, 2 second-round picks for Kyrie Irving. At that time, we thought they're insane.
Yeah.
They draft Derek Lively at number 12 overall in the draft.
Nice pick.
They trade Grant Williams, Seth Curry, a 2027 first, which was top 2 protected for P.J. Washington and 2 second-round picks. He's been invaluable on this playoff run.
Yeah.
They traded a 2028 pick swap for Daniel Gafford, who's been huge. And there you go. Now they're on the verge of going to the NBA Finals.
Nico Harrison's a pretty good general manager, I'll tell you that. From out of the campus at Nike. That's
mind-blowing.
Yeah, it's pretty good stuff.
All right, we'll keep things rolling. Dave Twardzik going to join us at 5:20.
I just wanted to let you know, I tried to call Angel Hernandez to congratulate him on his retirement.
Yeah.
He missed the call.
Yeah, his quote, retirement.
Yeah. Well, it was just one more missed call for him. What the heck.
That guy was absolute garbage. I can't believe, I looked it up. That guy was making over $400,000 a year to miss calls right and left.
Yeah.
And his pension's got to be phenomenal.
Yeah.
Made a fortune sucking at his job.
And you really don't negotiate retirement. You retire and you have benefits and you get them. This retirement was negotiated because the man retired a little sooner than he wanted, would be my guess.
Do you think social media had anything to do with his
Yeah, I do. He's
negotiation?
not the first guy to lose his job because of social media, I'll tell you that.
All right, we'll keep things rolling. You got the Rip City Drive with Dwight and Chad. All right, today's Rip City Drive is a celebration of the life of Bill Walton. Big thanks to Danny Ainge, who joined the show at the top, 3 o'clock. You can always podcast at ripcityradio.com on the iHeartRadio app or go to our YouTube page, youtube.com, Rip City Radio 620, and you can pull up the link to all of our live shows. And, of course, our past shows are there as well. But big thanks to Danny Ainge, David Lucas for joining us in studio, the Dean of Portland Sports, Kerry Eggers. And coming up here in 20 minutes, Dave Twardzik, former teammate of Bill, will join us as well. Your telephone number is 503-248-0620. We just had a caller reach out, Rick, to inform us that he spent a lot of time with Bill, even on a rafting trip where Bill went down something called the Widowmaker, which was pretty turbulent rapids, with a broken leg and a bag over his cast. That reminded me of my T-ball days when I ruined my chance finally to play first base, but I broke my arm and I had to spend the summertime taking baths with a bread sack over my cast.
God,
it was
that
the
must
worst, Godfather.
Terrible for a young boy. Summers are such a great time where you get to go outside and run wild, and
Yeah.
there you are with a cast.
I know. That's what I get for trying to play Spider-Man. It was awful.
Good thing it wasn't hot in Oklahoma that summer, I'm sure.
And not humidity at all. So
Oh, yeah.
nothing to worry about there. All right, so we'll get back to Bill here in just a moment, but a couple of quick things I want to touch on with you. First off, Angel Hernandez. He has just been vilified by all fans across the country, especially this year, for missing calls on a regular basis. He suddenly announced his retirement after 30 years in the majors. And it said his retirement was negotiated. None of us believe that he just decided to retire. You think baseball forced him out.
Yes, I do.
Why is that?
Well, because of his inferior umpiring, I think. And they grade these guys on every pitch they call, every out they call on the bases, every call they make. And I think his scores finally started consistently dropping into the area of the red zone, whatever that is, with umpires' calls. But I was told just a week ago that they don't let people go through during the season very often, and maybe have never done that. And I think they don't want it to be known that's what it was. That was part of the negotiation, is that it would be called a retirement. And I'm sure he has an NDA where he can't talk about the particulars of the settlement, quote unquote, but he's probably being pretty well compensated for taking a hike right now and, walking off the field and taking his umpire mask with him. I think that was it.
Baseball fans are celebrating.
Oh, they are. I mean, I've never seen an umpire. Of course, again, social media, it's one other guy, that this happens to, but social media spreads the word very quickly when you're not good at your job. And that's what this is.
All right, one other quick note. I just want to throw the French under the bus for a moment. French Open has just started, and much to my chagrin, Rafael Nadal, one of my favorite athletes of all time, has been knocked out in the first round. Because Nadal spent the last year rehabbing and dealing with injuries, he went into the French Open unseeded, which meant that he could be thrown in open seating into any match. And the French Open put him up against the number 4 player in the tournament, Alexander Zverev. And I think it's the most ridiculous decision I've ever seen made, where you've got Nadal coming in, the greatest French Open player in history, and you put him up against the number 4 seed in the first round. It's like, come on, people, what are we doing here? No one wants to see this other guy, whatever his name is. They're all there to see Nadal, and now because you put him in an impossible draw, he's knocked out. I just thought that was dumb. I'm bitter about that.
Yeah, I think you should be. And I think people who held tickets, tournament tickets for the French Open, are also very upset by it. They could have given him a much better draw and kept him through at least a couple rounds of that tournament. It should have been set up that way. All the French Opens that he had won, he deserves that kind of treatment. And let's face it, it's an entertainment vehicle too. Yeah, it's a competition, but you want people in the stands watching. You want people to be excited and interested. He wasn't going to win the thing anyway, probably as much time as he's taken off. So why not fix it up so he can at least get a round or two in before he's been eliminated?
Well, all I can hope is that he will spend more time getting his body right and come back to the French next year. He's talked about retirement. He hasn't fully committed to it yet, but you can't make that exit there your final memory at the French Open.
Yeah, and for people who don't understand, the French Open is played on a clay court, which is just the perfect court for him. It slows the ball down a little bit, makes it more of a finesse game than a power game like it is on some courts. And he's always been so good at it. He he wins it almost every year. And I guess there's some people probably that didn't want him to win it again, but he wasn't going to, not having played much last year. His game obviously isn't where he wants it to be. I just hope, Chad, that he can get his body back healthy again and maybe make one more run. He doesn't want to end on that kind of performance.
He's got 14 French Open titles.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
That is by far number one. He's the most dominant athlete I've seen on that surface, one of the most dominant athletes that I've seen ever. When he's on clay, one of the absolute best. All right.
Well, and just to say, clay is an art, playing on clay, because you have to learn how to skid.
Yeah.
And that's an art. And they talk about, I heard Connors talking about the other day that he wasn't good at it, but he said you really have to learn how to skid to a stop on clay. You can't just stop the way you would on a grass court or a hard court.
All right. Rip City Drive with Dwight and Chad. We touched on this a little bit with Kerry Eggers, but, I think it's important to discuss the entire story with Bill. I mean, those first couple of years when he came in, it was rocky, right? Like his teammates weren't particularly down. There were people concerned that they made the wrong choice. He had injuries. He was totally different than any other type of athlete that you would see because he was willing to stand up for what he believed in. He was a vegan before vegans even knew what that meant, and he did things his own way, a unique personality. How difficult was it in the beginning?
Yeah, well, not only that, Chad, but he had a beard, he had the long hair. He was a hippie, and everybody knew it. But you got to think back to that era, too. Hippies weren't the most popular people on the planet at that point. There was a lot of resistance to hippies because they brought certain values with them that weren't necessarily part of mainstream culture at the time.
So he was totally counterculture.
Yeah. Yeah, he was. And, you can be any way you want, but that doesn't mean people are going to like you for what you are, and there was definite some prejudice against him just for that. And then he starts getting hurt. He can't play. Wait a second. What did we waste this number one pick on anyway? What is he going to be? And there was real concerns until he was able to put together that magical season of 76, 77.
So really what changed was just health, being able to be on the floor and play.
Yeah. Well, you know how that is, Chad. You can have a beard, long hair, and anything else you want. If you win, you're good.
If you're finals MVP and league MVP, you can be as much of a hippie as you want.
Yeah, that's the only Blazer who's ever won those awards.
Is that pretty much the ultimate antidote in sports? You win, we'll support you no matter what.
It's the ultimate perfume, they say. And I wish we had some of it in here right now.
Well, what about that marriage with Jack? How much did Jack like him? I mean, what was Jack and Bill's relationship like?
Jack loved him, and he sang his praises over and over, which was, I think, a big thing in Jack's favor because everyone wants to be loved, and he hadn't gotten a lot of love up to that point. But Jack made it known this guy is not only a great player, he's a great person, and he said that over and over and over again to the point where some people say, who are you talking about anyway? This guy? But, yeah, he said it over and over. And he developed a system that was perfect for Bill Walton. No doubt about that part.
How much did his teammates resent at the time, maybe the extra love that Dr. Jack gave to Bill and Luke?
I think there was resentment at that time, Chad, that they were kind of, and maybe Jack was a leader in that category at this point. Jack knew that you better treat your superstars a little better than everybody else so that they would like you. Because if your superstars don't like you, you might as well just pack your bag and go home.
So even Dr. Jack understood the importance of having a good relationship with your superstar players.
Yeah, so him and Luke got pretty good treatment, and they deserved it.
What's so bizarre about all of this is that as quickly as it came to fruition, it ended just as quickly. Because I'm sure I wasn't, I was like 1 or 2 years old at the time. But I'm assuming that when they're 50-10, the championship was almost assumed, right? They were
Yeah.
going to win back-to-back titles.
There was nobody out there that was going to beat them. Nobody was going to beat them. 50-10, and they were cruising too.
They were mowing over
The
competition.
one thing that was prevalent at the time, though, was a suspicion that Ramsey was using Walton too many minutes. And people did talk about that even before the injury. It's like, no, they want to make sure they won as many games as possible. They were still in the prove-it stage of winning a championship.
Yeah, because everyone's like, well, it was kind of a fluke what you did last year.
That was a fluke. Yeah, you got lucky. You got through and you won one. But you had to win 2 in a row to really prove something. And they were in that mode of proving it. But Bill did get hurt, and that really was the end of the whole thing. It was. They couldn't survive without him. They tried. They tried with other centers in the same cast. But very soon, along with salary demands by certain players to renegotiate contracts, which also sped the demise of that team because some players ended up getting traded before they should have been. But there was a no renegotiation policy at the time from the owner, and the players didn't want to go along with that.
All right, Chris Burkhardt is here. He's been ignored all day because we've had guests in studio basically every minute of the show. But Burkhardt, it's great to see you, my friend. Did you have any personal interactions with Bill Walton during your time at NBC?
I only had one, and it was we were doing a Zoom call with him, and I don't even remember it because it was so off the rails, and I was in stitches the entire time. Like, I'm supposed to record it and produce it, and he is just going off on complete tangents that had nothing to do with the question asked, and I am just dying. Like, I can't tell you what one of the jokes was because I just could not stop laughing, and it was just quintessential Bill Walton.
He was good that way.
Oh, absolutely. It was great.
That's what he did.
Isn't that awesome when you ask someone a specific question and they give you an answer that's totally unrelated to anything that you just said?
But, like, we hadn't even started recording yet. Like, you jump in, and it's like he shows up. I think he was, like, 5 minutes late, right? And so, like, all right, we're just getting set up. He's like, oh, it's okay, take your time. I'm just happy to be here. It's a great day. And next thing you know, the ball has started rolling, and you cannot stop said ball. It's done. The snowball is there, and he's just ranting. At that point, we're looking at each other like, hey, we're all recording, right? Just in case he drops some comic gold. And I just remember that it was hilarious because I could not stop laughing.
How many questions you learned an early lesson in your early days in radio?
Yeah.
How many minutes did you take up on your show?
My first program in my first talk show, he was the guest, and I thought, perfect guest. I had him on 1 hour, David Stern on another hour. But, Stern he gave us 15 or 20 minutes from his limo, and that was great. And I expected Bill, maybe a longer segment. We'll give him 20 minutes, I hadn't dealt with a guest like him before. I had no idea what to do. But he comes on, I ask him one question. And after about 20 minutes, I still hadn't had a chance to ask him another question. And it was getting time. My producer's in the other room, glassed off, screaming at me and waving his arms that we have to cut to a break. And I'm helpless. I have no idea what to do. And finally, I just jumped in right in the middle of a sentence, said, Bill, we got to go to a break. And we went to a break. And we come back. I asked him one more question. I think in the whole hour he was on, 3 questions, one after each break, and that was it. He just took it from there and kept in a lot of that hyperbole, about, oh, I'm so happy to hear you got this show. You're the greatest. You're my favorite guy in the whole world. That whole spiel. And everything was great with Bill. And it was, I think, a memorable interview. I used to have it on a DVD, but I no longer have it.
I really miss the verbal battles that he and Steve Jones would get into on network television.
Yeah.
And Snapper would intentionally try to get under his skin to get
sure.
Bill.
Yeah.
Well, Steve, throw it down, big man. I mean, they found comedy in each other. They enjoyed those type of battles. I thought it was great.
Yeah. Yeah. That one year, I think the first year Bill was here, Jones was on the team still.
Huh.
Didn't play much, but they became friends, and it all started there. That's when it started.
The game is about men competing for the ultimate prize. Throw it down, big man. And I've heard Luke Walton joking about that too. Luke, take out the garbage, because his voice was so deep and
Deep. Luke ended up with a voice very similar to that. Actually.
he sounds a lot like his dad.
Yeah.
All right, when we come back, Dave Twardzik, teammate and part of the championship team here in Portland, will join the show, and we'll get his thoughts on the passing of the great Bill Walton at the age of 71. All right, Chris Burkhardt is playing Bill Walton approved music on the show today.
Yes.
Our next guest spent 4 seasons with the Trailblazers. He was the point guard on the 77 championship team. It's our pleasure to welcome Dave Torzik to the Rip City Drive. Dave, good afternoon. Thanks for your time.
Not a problem. How are you doing?
Oh, very well. Now, were you as surprised by the news that Bill had passed as we were?
Yes, I was. I was floored by it, and then to read that it was a long battle with cancer. As soon as I found out the news, I called Lionel, and I asked him, I said, "Did you know about Bill's struggle with cancer?" He goes, "No, I didn't." And as a matter of fact, Lionel said, "I just hung up with Johnny Davis. He had no clue either." So there were a lot of us that were hit pretty hard by this news.
You know, I want to talk about him, David, from, you know, the early days in Portland. And as I recall it, and I wasn't covering the team at the time, but I've heard stories over the years from you and others. But when he came, you know, he was like a hippie, and there weren't many hippies in the NBA at that time, let alone just around, you know, the city. And he also was a vegan. He lived a little different lifestyle, counterculture, I think people called it. And he was also hurt. How was there skepticism about him from the players when he arrived and when you got into that first season?
Well, I came the start of Bill's third season, so that would have been
Oh, that's right.
76, 77. So the first 2 years, I think he only played in 41 or 42 games
Wow.
each year. And I really didn't know much about the team when I first came out there. I mean, I had been in the ABA for 4 years. I was an ABA guy. Did I follow the NBA? Somewhat, but I mean, I was engrossed in the ABA at the time, so I didn't know much about the team. And I remember going to the first meeting we had, and was he different? Oh, he absolutely was. Culture-wise, I mean, he and I were probably opposite ends of the spectrum in many different areas. I mean, he's Southern California. I'm from a small town in Pennsylvania of about 9,000 people, so we had a lot of differences, but it never really spilled over onto the floor. I know he played in 60-some games his first year, and the way he competed at practice, and our team was kind of special back then because we had some common characteristics. We all had high basketball IQs. We were a relatively young team. I was 26, Dwight, at the time, and I was the second, I think third oldest. Larry Steele was a year older than I was, and then Herb Gilliam.
Yeah.
But we had a sense of maturity about us that was kind of uncommon for such a young team. So Bill was never a distraction because of him being the hippie or a counterculture guy or his beliefs politically, his lifestyle. That never was a problem.
All right, Dave. Now, that year that you got here, Luke arrived at the same time from the ABA dispersal draft, and teams weren't supposed to go ahead and get in the playoffs and go all the way had they never been there before. And you had a full team of people who had never been there before to a degree. How was it seeing that team develop, play together under Jack Ramsey, and then improve? And at what point did you think, wait a second, we might be good enough to win this thing?
Yeah, Dwight, that's a good question because I don't know if as players we felt that early in training camp or the first 20, 30 games of the season. But in conversations with Jack Ramsey years after that, Jack felt, and Jack McKinney and Jack Ramsey, the coaches, they felt even in training camp that this could be something special. But as players, we really didn't feel that. But I do think the beauty of that team, I think we had 7 new players come in. So the learning curve we were all at the same learning curve. New coaching staff, new system offensively, new system defensively. We were all learning at the same pace. It's not like you had 10 guys that knew the system, and we have to bring these other 2 along at some point. We were all learning at the same time, but after about 25, 30 games, we felt like we were going to be a pretty good team.
Now, the system, I thought, was incredible for the players on hand. It just seemed to fit you guys so well, starting with Bill and being able to use his playmaking skills. The running game was good. A lot of the things you did. Did it seem like a perfect marriage of talent and tactics at the same time?
I totally agree with that. You talked about Luke joining the team. That was a perfect marriage for Bill. And I don't know if they knew each other very well prior to Luke joining the team, but boy, they bonded quickly. And as far as on the floor, Bill was the finesse player. Luke was the enforcer. So if somebody got a little bit rough with any player on the team, whether it was Bill, I remember him telling me, "Hey, bring your guy by me one time, okay?" And it wouldn't be malicious, but he would lay the guy out in terms of, okay, well, you know what? Don't pressure that hard because I'm always going to be lurking. So there were so many common denominators of that team. I mentioned basketball IQ. From Bill all the way down to the 12th man, everybody had a high basketball IQ. We all bought into Jack's system, and the tone is really set by Bill. I mean, there was no question. He was your best player. And to see him buy into the system, to see him bust his tail every day at practice, it was easy to kind of fall in line and buy into the system and bust your tail at practice. And you talked about the playmaking of Bill. Over the weekend, our daughter came down with her 2 children, and they asked me, who was the best player you ever played with? Now, Dwight, remember, I played in the ABA. Julius Erving was a teammate, and George Gervin was a teammate.
That's pretty good. That's too good.
Pretty good player.
Yeah, no kidding.
Without a doubt, Bill was the best player I ever played with for those 2 years. He affected the game in so many ways, defensively, blocking shots, but his uncanny ability to pass. I made the statement on a couple interviews that he was the best passer I've ever seen, not just at the center position, but maybe in basketball. And we've seen a lot of players that are good passers in practice, but it doesn't translate in the game. Bill was a willing passer during the game. He sacrificed his own offense to make the pass for the well-being of the team, and it made everybody else better.
We, at times, have trouble making people realize how good he really was, because you know how the world is today. If they talk about greatest players ever, it always just includes the one they've seen play, not anybody before that. And it's like, I'm so happy to hear you say that, because I think people know Bill as an announcer, but they really never knew him as a player. He was such a comet going through the sky. I mean, 2 years is about all you got, except for the time with the Celtics, and he wasn't the same player with them as he was with you guys. So do you feel like sometimes people don't appreciate what you just said, how good he is or was?
Well, yeah, I totally agree with that. Here's the way I think Wilt Chamberlain was the best player to ever play.
I agree.
I mean, you just look at his numbers. Did he win the championship? No. But you look at his individual numbers and think about when he played, there were 10 teams in the league. So he's playing against Bill Russell 11 times, Nate Thurman, Hall of Fame, 11 times. He's playing against guys, centers that were Hall of Fame players. And he averaged 50 and 25 one year. You got to be kidding me. And I said, Bill, had he stayed healthy, based on the 2 years that I played with him, had he stayed healthy, he would have been the second best, certainly the second best center to ever play the game. And it's not any disparaging comments towards Kareem, but Bill affected the game in so many ways. He could score. He would rebound. He would block shots. He defends his own man. he would pass the ball. He would make some unbelievable assists. So I don't think people our age, I think people our age understand how good he was. I don't know if the younger people do understand, because when you look at him at Boston, that was a perfect situation for him. He didn't have to play big minutes. He wasn't the man, but yet his style was perfect for the Celtics. He'd give them a 5 or 6 minute run 2 or 3 times a game, and it was a perfect situation for him. So in my eyes, had Bill stayed healthy, he would have been the second best center to ever play.
We're talking with Dave Twardzik, member of the Trailblazers 77 championship team. We were laughing about this stat line from Game 6 of the finals that year, Dave. Bill Walton, 42 minutes, 20 points, 23 rebounds, 7 assists, and 8 blocks.
Yeah, not a bad day's work, isn't it?
Hey, Dave, you were a great broadcaster yourself, and I really think one of Bill's incredible accomplishments is being able to overcome the speech impediment and his shyness to become a great broadcaster. What do you make of that transition?
Well, that's a very good question, because I think there are two Bill Waltons that we're talking about. As a player, Bill and Dwight, you would know this. I don't think Bill was the most cooperative with the media. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. We've talked about that earlier. He was not known for that. Let's put it that way.
No,
Yes.
no, that was not his long suit, okay?
Yeah.
And then even with fans, he was kind of reluctant. He would interact, but not a lot. He would interact with fans, but not a lot. And then all of a sudden, he goes through a lot of injuries and rehab and a lot of pain. He went to a pretty dark place emotionally. He comes out of that, and he's a different person. He becomes a member of the media, and whether you liked his broadcasts or not, they were always entertaining. And then his interaction with people and some of the things he used to do, I mean, I can't imagine. Like, I read one article where he dressed up as Uncle Sam during one game.
Oh, God.
Dwight, can you see him doing that when he was playing?
No, not at
No,
all.
he was two different people, and a tremendous transition. And I think part of it was the tremendous effort to overcome the stuttering, and he became much more comfortable in public. And he was one of a kind. There's no question about it.
I mean, Dave, are you saying you never brought a massive chunk of cactus into a game and presented it to Bill Schonely as a gift?
No, there were many times when I wanted to bring more than cactus, but I never did.
Yeah, I was there for you a few of those times. But, Dave, there was such a great bond between you guys. And we talked to David Lucas about that earlier, and the high regard everybody held for each other on that championship team, and the fact that you all had each other's backs all the time. What a great group that was and is still, I think. And it must be something you look back on with a great deal of pride, to not only win it, but to be that close with your teammates.
Well, it is something special. There were no hidden agendas on the team. There was nobody going out for stats. I mean, when you get your best player, which was Bill, sacrificing his own offensive game to run the system and get everybody involved, again, it's easy to kind of fall in line there. But we were a pretty young team. I mean, I was 26. I think Herm was 28. Larry Steele was 27. And we were the three oldest. But we were pretty mature for our youth. And we had a lot of respect for each other. We had a lot of respect for each other's game. So, and I think that all translates onto the floor. It is rare to be in a situation like that and to be part of it. Man, you look back and you appreciated it a little bit at the time. You appreciated winning a championship at the time. But I have to tell you, Dwight, the farther removed I get from winning the championship, the more I appreciate that, and the more I appreciate the bond with the teammates.
Was Bill a leader? And if so, what type of leader was he?
Yeah, Bill was a leader. He wasn't afraid to express his opinion, and don't ask Bill a question if you're afraid of the answer that he might give you. I mean, he would give you. He was very honest, and he would come out and he would get on you a little bit, but it's not a yeller, not a screamer, but it would just be something. Hey man, come on, let's go. You got to get it going. And again, this is the best player on your team. It was easy to kind of fall in line.
You know, Dave, I always hear players talk about championships and what it means, but you know, you just mentioned as time goes on, you appreciate it even more. But how awesome is it to win a championship?
There's nothing better. I mean, my situation was so unique. I came from the ABA where the Virginia Squires folded as soon as the season ended. Paycheck stopped right when the season ended, so I didn't get paid for half of that year. So to go from that, where we won, I think we won under 20 games, so we were like 20-62. That's getting your tail handed to you night in and night out. To go from that, and in situations like that, that's when hidden agendas start rearing their ugly head. Guys go out, hey, man, I got my stuff tonight. I got 20 tonight, or I got 11 rebounds. Well, in losing situations, that's what happens. In winning situations, that never rears its head. So to go from the situation I was in Virginia to coming to Portland, great place to live, great fans, a great place to play, and to have a new coaching staff and everybody learning at the same curve, and to be as successful as we were and as tight as we were, that's something special, and very few players at any sport experience that.
David, are you still working for Old Dominion, your alma mater, or what are you doing right now? You retired yet?
Well, I'm not completely retired, Dwight. Kathy will not let me retire.
Yeah, I figured
She
that.
she actually wanted me to go apply to be a Walmart greeter because I stopped the Old Dominion.
Oh, God. You'd be good at it, I'll say that. You'd be damn good for them.
Well, I did not do Old Dominion, the broadcasting this year, but I'm still working for the Spurs. I've been working with them for about 5 years, and it's kind of interesting how I got the job. It was a gentleman that I hired when I was in Orlando as an intern was so impressive. I hired him full time when his internship was up, and his name is Brian Wright, and we worked together for about 4 or 5 years, and I made him the scouting coordinator. And Dwight, I included him in everything, dealing with agents, players, salaries, coaches, scouting staff, colleges. And I used to tell him about once a month. I said, be right, be patient. You're going to be a GM one day. And every time I say that, he'd go, DT, when I get the job, you're going to be my first hire. Well, he became GM of San Antonio, comes out of the press conference, calls me that day and says, it's done. You want to go to work for me. So I'm a consultant to the general manager.
Awesome.
And since I didn't do much, I didn't do any Old Dominion games this year because that was a 4-hour drive up there on Wednesday, and I'd drive back Sunday after the games. It just got to be too much. I did that for 4 years, and I stopped doing it this year, and I probably scouted about 16 or 17 college games.
Well, that's good because now I know you're there, David. I bet you're the guy that found that unknown kid over in France and said, why don't you draft this kid? He's kind of tall and he can make shots from distance.
No one had heard about him. You're right. No one had heard about him until I said, now, he's a little thin. He's a little thin, but don't be fooled by his lack of weight.
Wow. I mean, seriously,
I tell
Dave,
you what,
you talk about
he is in.
yeah. How awesome is he? How awesome is he through your eyes?
Well, the biggest part of my job is I come back, I turn on our game, the Spurs games, and I'm texting with the general manager during the games. It's like, hey, why is Wembanyama? How come he's not posting up? Why are we running the pick and roll? How come we're defending things differently? So throughout the game, we're constantly texting back and forth, and I bet I saw close to 65 of our games this year. He did at least one thing every game where you just shake your head and you go, he shouldn't be able to do that. One, he was 19 at the time. He just turned 21 in the middle of the 20 in the middle of the season, and he's like a forward in a 7'4" frame, and he's such a awesome, grounded person. If he's not the face of the NBA is making a huge mistake.
Well, it's Dave Twardzik, member of the 77 championship team, sharing his thoughts on Bill. Hey, Dave, well, that was an awesome interview, man. Thank you so much for coming on.
Anytime. Dwight, it's always good to hook up with you. We have some stories now, don't we?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and we won't be telling them on the radio either.
Give them to me.
Oh.
No.
Hey,
No,
be sure and tell Kathy hello for me. She's your better half, and I emphasize better, that's for sure.
You know, you're not the first person to say that. I'm starting to take it a little personally.
Yeah, well, good. You should.
She's the best. She is the best. We're going to be celebrating 54 years. 54, 53. Awesome. It goes by so fast.
Congratulations, Dave.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, Dave Twardzik here on the Rip City Drive. Thank you for that one, Dwight. He was awesome.
Of course he was. He's a good one. Great guy, and he was great with Sean's on the radio. I don't think he ever had a partner quite like Dave Twardzik, a guy who played the game, who knew the game backwards and forwards, but has a great sense of humor and wasn't above poking fun at Sean's once in a while.
Dave said that Bill is the best passing player in the history of the NBA.
Yeah, best passer he's seen.
Not just center, best passer he's ever seen. All right, we'll keep things rolling here. And a celebration of the life of Bill Walton today, and I think that's the way he would want it. Big thanks to Dave Twardzik. You got the Rip City Drive. I got to hand out a high five to Dave Twardzik. He was sensational. I don't think I've ever had a chance to talk to him on the radio before. I've talked to many of the members of the 77 team, but not Twardzik, and he was everything you said he was. He was terrific.
Yeah.
What a guy.
Yeah, very funny.
What about you?
Well, I'm going to give mine to David Lucas for coming in and sharing his thoughts and memories of Bill Walton. I think that was a difficult thing for him to do. He's been doing it all day. I know he's been interviewed several times because of his closeness to Bill. And it was kind of him to drop by the studio and do that.
In a lot of ways, it's like losing his dad all over again.
Yeah.
Because he's got to relive that. And Bill was a father figure to him. Burkhart, you got any high fives or any words of wisdom you want to get out to the masses?
Words of wisdom. I don't have a lot of words of wisdom, my man. I'm still learning, but no, I think you might as well give high fives out to Danny Ainge and Kerry Agers too. Kerry Ager, just a fountain of wisdom, and then of course Danny Ainge, he was open too. I like the fact they actually answered the basketball questions. So high five to them.
It was kind of curious too how Danny emphasized how much he missed Portland and wouldn't, I thought that was pointed. That's just me saying that, but I think that was pointed a little bit about probably should have been interviewed here for the vacant general manager job.
Especially knowing he had interest. That's one of those memories I just got to erase from my mind. What are you saying? Danny Ainge had interest in being here?
So I think I told Dwight during the break earlier, I was like, yeah, I noticed how he very, like you said, pointedly, he said, oh, I love Portland. I miss Portland. I'm rooting for Portland. Yeah, he knew what he was doing.
All right, let's go out to the phones. Raider Mike wants to have the final say. Raider Mike, welcome to the show, my friend.
What's up, bro, man? You get a gut punch right before your birthday, Jim Otto, and then they double down on my gut and take Bill. I mean, it's been a rough week, bro. When your heroes start dying, that means you're old, Chad.
Yeah. Tell me about it.
I guess. But Bill was our unicorn. He brought us our one and only championship. The guy was he's a god here. And he's just the coolest dude in the world. I mean, throw it down, big man. I mean, the guy just was Portland. Perfect time for him to be in Portland. Eugene connection with the dad. I'm a singer, man. I could fart, Jerry Garcia, but easy voice, but great music. And Billy's our boy.
I think that's well put. He was perfect in Portland, Godfather.
Yeah, it sure was. And it hurts, I think, to hear that, what Dave said, if healthy, second greatest center of all time.
And the team
Best
wins multiple
passer.
championships.
Yes, and that was that follows. All those championships that never were.
That's pretty cool. What did Dave say about 20 to 30 games into that season? That's when the players started to realize, like, hey, we got something special here.
And I did always hear that story that Ramsey and McKinney, just in training camp, were saying, you know what? We might have something here.
All right. Big thanks to Chris Burkhart, to all of our guests today, and all of you for listening. We appreciate it. We're back tomorrow. Rip City Drive at 3. Justin Myers in for Rip City Mornings at 6. Have a good night, Godfather.
You too.